Hi, this is a wrap up for week 3 of New Orleans November. Time is flying by. I managed to read quite a few things for week 3 of New Orleans November. The prompt was classic science fiction. I think that was science fiction. Anything before 1965, I think. Although I may have the year wrong, but it was definitely classic science fiction. And the first thing was from 1952, this Galaxy Science Fiction magazine. And the first story I read for week 3 was Year of the Jackpot by Robert A. Heinlein. Robert A. Heinlein is quite a famous name in science fiction, although I've not read him all that much. And Year of the Jackpot starts with a young woman peeling off her clothes. And this causes a bit of a stir in town, and this a police officer notices it, but a statistician, mathematician guy intervenes, and the police officer knows that person, and they intervene, and they takes care of the young woman, takes her to his house, and he's sort of this woman taking her clothes off on a hot sunny day is not uncommon, and it's happened in a number of other towns and cities, and it's the mathematician, statistician type guy has been recording these and other various events. It doesn't really say the age of the mathematician main character guy. I'm not exactly sure how old, middle age probably. But he's been noticing these occurrences, and they've been in the newspapers, and he's sort of, as a statistician, he's noted all the numbers and noticed various other things, calling it a silly season, and sort of likening it also to lemmings, which I think has actually been sort of scientifically disproven. Lemmings don't actually commit mass suicide. It's a different sort of thing where they sort of breed their numbers down, I think. It was on QI, a British comedy science panel show. So anyway, the years progress, and I think Year of the Jackpot I would class as the sub-theme of romance. I would think it's a odd sort of a romance. I think he refers to her as Reuben more than once, and on one occasion he refers to her as a statistic, and she doesn't take too kindly to that. But over the course of the short story, they get married while all these crazy sort of incidents, which are actually predicted by the mathematician, happens as he's sort of in sort of like a grid. He's numbering all these incidents, and eventually the incidents gain more and more severity, and with it being written in the 1950s, it does end in nuclear weapons, which was a massive thing in fiction at that time. Maybe it still is, but it is to a lesser extent. But in the time of the Cuban Missile Crisis, nuclear was very heavy in all sorts of science fiction and fiction. And it sort of ends a bit like Terminator 3, except not as dull. It ends with nuclear thingies going off in a bit of a dire note. He glanced down at the journal, still open beside him. 1739 AD and 2165. He did not need to add up the two figures and divide by 2 to reach the answer. Instead, he clutched fiercely at her hand, knowing with an unexpected and overpowering burst of sorrow that 1952 was the end. Ooh. So yeah, grim sort of ending, but a very good story. I think dated in its sort of attitudes towards the female, like quite a few of these stories, I think. Next short story I read in this magazine, where is it? Yeah, The Seventh Order by Jerry Sohl. Sohl. S-O-H-L. Sohl. No, how you pronounce it. And it's this sort of he's sort of like a well-mannered Cyberman. Quite a benign Cyberman. Comes down to Earth. He's this omnipotent, super powerful robot or an android type character. And a lot of people at first think it's a prank. This kid's fallen. But he goes to a psychiatrist or professor, Professor Tomlin. And Professor Tomlin, and again a sort of dated sort of thing, he's on his porch smoking a pipe, which I thought was quite dated. But he's on his porch smoking a pipe, and the I don't think I could call it invader, but the invader, the Cyberman type character, just comes in to chat with them. Sort of to convince the professor, or just to tell the professor that they will be more like him coming to invade, and there's nothing that can be done about it. And the police get involved, and other people get involved, and this ends up with somebody trying to tackle the invader from beyond space, and that doesn't end well. It kind of reminded me of the original Day the Earth Stood Still. Gort had this beam thing that fired out of its eye or its head or its visor, and it just melted the tanks and the weapons away. It's a really cool thing, and that really reminded me of this. He just zaps the person, and there's just a sort of a black smoking crater that's left, sort of a very classic science fiction style. So there's nothing that can be done for the most part. This robot's all powerful, but the professor does devise, with the military, he devises this thing that was a mental sort of blockage, where the Cyberman type character knows that there's some can predict various things, but because this one soldier has a block, he's looking at the soldier, but he can't tell what's going on. The soldier's been hypnotized to so unconsciously focus on this clock at this specific time, and everybody else just shoots the omnipotent robot and stops him. So invasion stopped, just like that. It's sort of a bit like the ending of the John Carpenter Village of the Dead, I think it is, or the one that's based off of The Midwich Cuckoos by John Wyndham, where he has this the character played by Christopher Moore. He's got this sort of brick wall in his head, and he blocks the children from devising the trap. So it's quite a good story. Again, I really liked it. Next story in the same magazine is Catch That Martian by Damon Knight, and it's sort of a tongue-in-cheek story about this Martian who can send people to a sort of phantom zone just for the slightest little thing. If they eating loudly, he just zaps them into the phantom zone. If they talk loudly, he zaps them into the phantom zone. And it's also in part sort of a detective story. When the Martian zaps them, they become sort of like ghosts, really. They're visible, they're there, but you can walk through them, and there's no matter as such. And spoiler alert, I really should do spoiler alert for all these stories if you're wanting to read them. But spoiler alert, the detective is unsuccessful, and he himself becomes one of these people in the phantom zone and ghost type people. And then what? I asked him. Well, he said, eventually, if he keeps it up long enough, we'll all be over here. I hope he's right. Now that I come to think of it, that cute waitress I mentioned has a habit of setting down a cup of coffee, so half of it slops into the saucer. If Mr. Darth is right, all I've got to do is wait. It stands to reason. So he himself and a huge chunk of New York, where it's set, are in this phantom zone, and the Martian is not caught. Quite like that. I sort of just picked and chose with these things what I read. The next magazine is Amazing Stories, and even though it has a very funky front cover, this is actually from 1953. Copyright 1953. Ziff Davis Publications. Publishing company. I don't know if they're still around. Oops. So the first short story I read in this magazine I read besides Still Waters, and it's quite a somber, sort of sad story. There's this warrior, space warrior guy, who's just on this planet, on this asteroid type planet, all alone apart from the robot he's with. And it's quite sort of sad. They have a friendship, but when the human character dies, the robot soon ceases to function. It's kind of sad. The robot is named Charles. Charles stood beside the body of his friend. He felt for a pulse once and allowed the withered hand to fall. He walked to a corner of the shack and turned off the tired air pump. The tape that Mark had prepared had a few cracked inches left to run. I hope he finds Martha, the robot croaked, and then the tape broke. His rusted limbs would not bend, and he stood frozen, staring back at the naked stars. Then he bowed his head. "The Lord is my shepherd," Charles said. "I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down. In green pastures he leadeth me." So the Martha female is just a hypothetical sort of thing, really. The next short story I read was a bit of a strange one. The Mathematicians by Arthur Feldman. So set in the, I think it would maybe be classed as the sub-theme of far future. It doesn't say, but imagine it is at some time after humanity's sort of been conquered by a cross between devils and angels, they're called anvils, which I thought was quite smart. It's quite a funky illustration, which doesn't really look 1950s to me. It looks much more like 1970s, but no, it's just the 1950s. So that kind of threw me a little bit. But then again, there's so many things that you think it's one decade or moment in time, but it turns out it's something else. I'm sure quite a lot of cars look like that. You think it's from one sort of decade, but it turns out to be something else. And it's told in the alien mother and father, they're telling their alien child the story of how it used to be with the humans and how they were conquered. Kind of interesting short story. Next was a very, very short story. It's pretty much 2 pages really. This one page. That's it. A very short story. I could probably read it actually, but The Hands by Richard Sternbach. He was a gigantic figure, sitting there atop the mountain. He could have leaned over and dammed the river below with a finger. He sat on top of the mountain, and his beard in the wind was a white flag. Across the plains, as he watched, there were fires glowing, and the mountain under him trembled from explosions 1,000 miles away. He bent his head, and a muffled cry reverberated down the hillside and through the valley. A smaller figure appeared beside him, looking sad. Try again, father, the smaller one said. The old one shook his head. It would be the same. Give them another chance. They would do it again. Just once more. The old one shook his head again, and for a while they sat, and they watched the destruction. The fires burned higher, and the explosions shook their mountain more roughly. At last, at the end, the old one reached down and scooped up some clay from the bank of the river. He held it in a huge, gentle hand, and the younger one smiled. You are good to give them another chance, father. Not them, said the old one. What do you mean? The son asked wonderingly. Something else, the majestic figure answered, starting to knead the clay. What shall it be? So there you go. There's God and Jesus after what I again assume is nuclear Armageddon. It doesn't really say it, but I think it's a relatively safe guess that that's what it is. And so God is going to give it another chance to some sort of other life form. And I'd imagine that life form might be some sort of crustacean. You know, that might be what comes after humanity. But I don't know, it's quite good. Quite a thought-provoking short story. I don't know if it's 500 words or not. It's very short. And there's another short story in this magazine I read that's very tongue-in-cheek, very silly, but it did make me smile and giggle. Sloughs of Cruvney by Vern Fion. At least I think that's how you pronounce it. You can tell it's sort of a very silly story, but it did make me giggle. I suppose it's a bit like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams, but also sort of made me think of Mad Magazine as well. Some of the funny stuff, but not as funny as Mad Magazine. It's really funny. There's all sorts of puns. There's all sorts of play on words. So the story, if there really is one, is just two space explorers, really just visiting a sort of odd planet, really. It's really just about the puns and the clever sort of funny wordplay. I could have underlined it, but I don't want to underline the magazine as old as this. The broad shoulders were brave, but things happened to them. His grandfather, a traffic officer, had chased a comet for speeding and had unfortunately overtaken it. His father had been spared the fire, but one day, aboard a spaceship, someone spilled a glass of water. The gravity was off at the time, and the water just hung there in the mid-air until Brad's father walked into it and drowned. It's very silly, funny stuff. And that's quite, I think, hard to do in science fiction, and to really pull it off, and to not annoy people. It doesn't always happen, doesn't always work, but there can be good science fiction comedy. A really good example is Red Dwarf, science fiction TV show back in the early 90s. It was on BBC. They tried to make an American version of it, but it didn't work. You need to see the British version. This I think is the best example of science fiction comedy. There's quite a few sort of funny. Oh yeah, there's a ray gun. Brad's eyes brightened. A ray gun. May I see how it works? You may, indeed you may. A platoon of maroon dragoons dragged in a queer apparatus. It looked like a medieval cannon with a Victorian phonograph speaker flaring from its flaring from its business end. The dragoons ranged around the weapon, keeping their backs to it. One of them clutched the firing lanyard. There was a pause, a brittle silence. Then the lanyard snapped. "Ray!" shouted the ray gun. "What was that?" asked Brad. Twice more the lanyard snapped. The ray gun boomed. "Ray! Ray!" "You mean all it does is shout Ray?" asked Brad. "Well, it can also shout Max," said the old man. "Fearful, ain't it?" I thought that was quite funny. Ray gun. I'm sure that joke has been done numerous times, but that made me laugh. Ray gun. And the last short story I read was just, again, another quite short story. It's from Spaceway, and volume 1, number 2. And this is also from the 1950s, I think. Should see on the front. 1954. This magazine also has a really nice smell to it. You know, it smells like an old book or magazine would. Bookmark. A Look at the Stars by Gene Hunter. And again, this is quite a depressing short story. It's set on some off-world place, and it's two characters talking, a male character, female character, or there's the young child character. And it's really about the child character's 12, but they're a man. They've aged according to the planet, and I'm not sure if they're exactly marooned, but their options are limited since they're not really making rockets anymore for some reason. I'll read the last bit. Mike lay looking up at the stars. He was oblivious to the bed, the transloid walls, the furnishings of a boy's room, the two adults watching from the doorway. "He's looking at the stars," the old man whispered. The woman said nothing. Like Dirk, when they took the rockets away, only he doesn't know why he feels like he does. Dirk did, or at least he had a glimmer of understanding they were taking something away from him. Men can still go to the stars, but not in ships, not in the rockets. They watched. Finally, the boy's trembling hand reached out, and a 10,000,000,000,000 lights looking down at him were gone. There was a sharp, clear sound of animal-like pain from his throat. He whirled over and buried his head in the pillow, their eyes not yet accustomed to the darkness. The old man and the woman could not see him now, but they heard his sobs. "You see," his mother insisted, "he's sick." "Yes," Gramps agreed softly, "he's sick." So they're sort of marooned on this planet. The boy's father's a rocket space guy, but then for whatever reason they don't, maybe technology, they don't have the rockets anymore, so they're sort of marooned off of up in space. So a bit of a downer ending to week 3, but some really good short stories there. You Have the Jackpot by Robert A. Heinlein, I think, is well worth a read. And if you're in the mood for a comedy, it is worth reading The Sloths of Crowbney by Vern Fearing. It's funny stuff. So that was week 3. Quite interesting works. For week 4, I don't really have that much. I've got 2 short stories from Asimov's science fiction from June 2008. This one on the front cover, The Hot Carpet by Ian R. MacLeod. And there's one that sounds intriguing just by the title alone. It is called, if you can find it, Burger Droid by Felicity Shoulders. Kind of some made up name. But yeah, Burger Droid, that sounds interesting. I also have one Starblazer to read, Robot Rebellion, for week 4, Robots and AI. And from the library I have Anthology, a collection of 8 science fiction and fantasy short stories. I'm not too sure who this is edited by. It's a bit of a sort of odd, sparse sort of thing. It's got 4 short stories and 4 fantasy short stories. I don't know who it was edited by. I'm not sure. It doesn't say. But for this, I will be reading Paying Old Debts by Jerry Lean. It may not be a robot AI story, but that looks like a android or robot hand, so I'm going to read it and find out. So looking forward to that. Thanks for watching. Bye.